Today, what we'll cover is the introduction. We'll talk about risk management, the standards and guidelines. Risk assessment is a major part of risk management. Throw some definitions at you guys, and then talk about how to conduct a risk assessment and how to communicate the risk. I'm Alturi, Srinivas, Srini. I'm a Vice President for Cybersecurity Services at Anvaya Solutions. We basically what we do is we assess, secure, we help you guys develop a monitoring system and then help in incident response, develop security awareness training for your people. We also do security audits. Been in information security for 18 plus years, different domains, worked at a Fortune 50 company, and you have my contact information there. You can take a picture. You can reach me anytime if you have some questions. Okay.
Good morning. I'm Denise Mellor. I don't have a mic over there, so sorry for the back and forth. And I am the Agency Information Security Officer for two agencies, Business Consumer Services and Housing and Government Operations Agency. And then I like to say my day job is at the Franchise Tax Board, where I'm the Chief Security Officer and responsible for privacy, security, and disclosure there. I've been doing that for 11 years now. My background is not in IT. So that surprises people sometimes when they say, well, you don't have a technical background. I'm an auditor, originally a tax auditor. But my background really is in risk management. And so that's what I really believe the biggest value that I bring to the organizations that I serve. So you've got my contact information. If you have any questions for me after the session, feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Denise. So let's delve right into risk management. What is risk management? Here we're focused on security, information security risk management, but it applies. It's a broader domain. You got business risk management, then you got physical domain risk management. We'll cover mostly our security, InfoSec risk management. It's basically DHS, they define it really well, so I took it with pride. It's a process for identifying, analyzing, and communicating your risk. And then there are 4 choices. Once you analyze the risk, you accept, avoid, transfer, control. Basically, you want to do that to an acceptable level to your organization, taking into account the costs for managing that risk and the impact. Like I said, it's a work breakdown structure. Basically, it feels complicated, but if you break it down into small steps, it's easy. It's asset identification and categorization, risk assessment. I'll ask you guys to memorize this. It's only 4 steps in risk assessment: identify, analyze, prioritize, and communicate. It's that simple. Then how do you disposition the risk? Accept, avoid, transfer, and control. Remember that by AATCHO, AATCHO. So accept, avoid, transfer, and control. And then you monitor the risk, because you have to be conducting your risk assessment at a particular frequency. It's not a once and done, because what is low risk today changes. It could change tomorrow or a week or a month from now when new vulnerabilities, new threats are announced. You all heard about 0 day. So you need to continuously monitor that. And it applies to your existing infrastructure, your new infrastructure, and if a 0 day is announced, that applies to you. It's always contextual. Then you need to take a look at your risk assessment again. See if what you did yesterday is still valid today, or what you did today is still valid 3 months from now. So for risk assessment, there are many standards and guides. You got the NIST, you have ISO, you have COBIT, and you have the FISMA, SAM. If you look at all of them, you'll be quite overwhelmed. I did spend time looking at all of them. If I wasn't feeling sleepy, I pick up one of those documents and start reading. I'm out in 5 minutes. So if you try to read all of them, this will happen to you. There's so much to read Once I thought, this weekend I'm going to sit and read NIST 837, 53, and going to come with something. I didn't finish 37 in 1 weekend. It took me almost 2 weeks to get through it because it's a bunch of text. If I stack it up here, those blocks, I chose it on purpose because if I stack all those documents here, they would be about this high. And you don't want to go through all those. So what we did is we looked at it and said, no, let's condense that and make it simple. Like I said, the 4 processes for risk assessment: identify, analyze, prioritize, communicate. Working as well as I thought. I really like this. I wanted you to see it. We're here to help you. If you look at the risk management framework from NIST, I believe it's 853. Sorry if I get my numbers mixed up. There's so many that I read and I don't remember them. The RMF and NIST is 6 components. You categorize, you select, implement, assess, authorize, monitor. Remember what I said, monitor? It's not a once and done. This itself is quite laborious and quite intensive. So on the handouts that you guys have, the first sheet, it says risk management, and there's the blocks. I didn't put arrows on purpose. I wanted you guys to fill them in as we're stepping through. So we took this stack of documents and we said, let's show our colleagues how easy it is if you follow a disciplined, it's more like a project management approach. Your first step, you identify and you categorize the assets. After that, you conduct your risk assessment. So follow me and please fill in your sheets, draw your arrows, so when you go home, you have that with you. Under risk assessment, you have risk identification, risk analysis, risk prioritization. You develop a risk mitigation plan. Remember what I said, the 4: accept, avoid, transfer, control. The mitigation plan should address some of them, 1 or more of them. Then you communicate your risk to your project team, your managers, your senior management. Then once it's approved, you implement your risk management plan, or if they want to accept it without doing any mitigation, it's a variance. Everybody know what a variance is? Show of hands. Okay, most. Variance is basically like a waiver. You're communicating the risk to the management, and management decides. It's contextual, right? They decide, do we want to accept it? Do we want to avoid it by can the project? I've seen that happen. Do you want to transfer it? Or do you want to control it by implementing new controls? Am I missing anything?
Yeah, so if I could just add, a variance typically is going to be a limited period of time where you're going to accept whatever mitigation plan's been developed in the time frame that it was suggested. If you're going to 100% accept the risk without treating it, or you've done some minor treatment and you're going to accept it, then you might look at an exception. But again, those things have to be reevaluated at a regular time period because your risk changes, the environment changes that you operate in. So that's one great way to track things that you've identified and you've treated or accepted.
And like Denise said, for variance, I normally recommend, depends on the issue. If it's really critical, you give it a few weeks. Not as critical, maybe, and a quarter to 6 months and so on. But don't go more than 6 months. Then you monitor the risk, what Denise just said. You monitor it all the time. And then you conduct when you monitor, what do you do in 6 months? You go through risk assessment again. You will see as we go through slides how risk changes over time. We'll show that. And if the asset categorization changes, then you probably want to actually start at the beginning. Start right there. So before we go more into risk management, let's talk about some definitions. They should be there on your handouts too. I think on the back. I believe. Some critical terms. These terms basically put things in context for us. What's a threat? Threat's an entity that can harm. It's a malware, virus, anything that causes unwanted impact to a system or organization. Like you see, you have a disgruntled employee, that's a threat. Somebody's got a foothold in your network, that's a threat. Or a malware or virus, most common threats. Vulnerability is a weakness that has an impact. We all heard the phrase, a chain is only as strong as the weakest link. It's no different here in InfoSec. That's true too. So basically, it's any weakness. It could be administrative, process, physical controls, or that makes an asset that's susceptible to exploit by a threat. I just have two examples, poor physical controls, insecure code. Last year, no names mentioned, we're at a site and physical control, they didn't have a sign on the door that said no food or drinks in the data center. That's bad. I mean, you have one spill, goes to the tiles, a lot of things go bad. I have seen that happen with the water leak. So that's the first thing I told the manager. I said, I think what we need is a sign before. Print one up and put it up there. It doesn't need to be fancy. Insecure code. We'll talk about that. Exploit. It's a method to exercise a vulnerability. How do you exploit the vulnerability to create a negative impact on the environment? SQL injection and phishing. We all know that's one of the most common social engineering hacks that happens day in, day out. How many of you got UPS shipment? Oh, it's UPS shipment, it's waiting for your pickup. You got those emails? Especially at Christmas time, Christmas, Thanksgiving. When I'm called in, I ask the question, they go, oh, I clicked on it. And I go, were you expecting a shipment? No, but I thought somebody was sending it to me. Were you expecting somebody to send it to you? Their system was owned, and they were on a network, and that malware kept spreading. So that's social engineering. We do secret awareness training. We talk about that quite a bit. Exposure. How available is the vulnerability for exploitation? What's the potential damage or loss when that vulnerability is exploited? It could be anything from losing the IP intellectual property, losing domain credentials, losing credentials to email accounts, bank information, personal banking, corporate banking, personal health information, PII, that's government ID, social security number, passport, whatever. And the impact. If all these happen, the threat exploited the vulnerability, and then something was exposed, that's the impact. What's the damage or loss from exploitation of it by a threat? It's brand damage, loss of confidence for your customers, loss of confidence of the employees in their own employer. It's basically a brand damage, right? So to put that in perspective, when you look at that logo, what do you think first? This cute puppy. Another breach. Whenever I see all of that, I see Home Depot, that's what I see. Identity theft, Home Depot happened. We got Anthem, Target, recently Blue Cross Blue Shield. That's basically what I think, identity theft. So now that I gave you guys the definitions, let's have a pop quiz. I give the first answer. Okay, it's free. I'll give it to you. There you go. Lack of input validation. Let's read the definitions. And what did I say is vulnerability? Insecure code. Two free answers. No, I'm not going to say anything anymore. Regulatory requirements burden. It's a burden, it's a threat. It's because all the onerous regulatory requirements that make you hire this 20 lawyers and make you keep all this documentation, it's impacting your business process. Default password. I can hear you. You got it. Loss of confidentiality. Good job. Potential access to confidential information. Correct. You're not done yet. Remote command execution as a user, nobody. Doesn't have to be a domain account. That's a user, nobody. Who has to exploit? It is an exploit when that happens. But vulnerability is basically you're letting that user be able to access it. When that's used, that becomes an exploit. Makes sense that it's a fine line between the two. We talked SQL injection, so I'm giving you that answer. Inadvertent action, sharing wide. This again can be two answers. So 50% chance of getting it right. What could the other one be? Potential threat. This is what it is. Inadvertent action, that's a threat. That's an uneducated employee that it's basically sharing their the shares wide open, keeping them wide open. But the vulnerability is when you're sharing it wide. Right? Again, there's a fine line there. Next one, running services such as Finger. For Unix people will understand this. Any Unix people here? Unix, Linux? Okay, fine, I'll give it. It's a vulnerability. Regulatory penalties. Remember what we said? The regulatory burden is a threat. What are the penalties? Impact, correct, thank you. Disgruntled employee. That's a threat. Loss of trust, brand damage. Correct, thank you. So having said that, let's ask the question, is every vulnerability a risk? Any lawyers here? Because I always get this answer from all my legal friends. It depends. Every vulnerability is not a risk. It's a risk when it's exposed to a credible active threat that's capable of exploitation. And exploitation of this vulnerability has a significant impact to your organization. Does it, just because somebody exploited something, does it impact your organization? Do you need to mitigate it? Those are all the things that you need to think through. Your business impact, the cost to mitigate this versus spending your resources on another issue that you can tackle. We'll talk at a high level about how do you conduct a risk assessment, and then we will actually delve in the next slides into the risk assessment. We ended 11. We should finish by 10:45. Okay, speed up. So when you conduct a risk assessment, you need to understand your organization's risk tolerance, go through the process, identify, analyze, prioritize, and communicate. Like I said, memorize these 4 words.
Yeah, so if I could just say a few words about understanding your organization's risk tolerance, that's really, really, really important. So not only from if you're mandated to follow NIST and where you're using the high, medium, low designations for your controls, that's one type of risk, but you really need to understand what level of risk is your organization going to tolerate, and what does that match up at all levels of your organization going up into your executive office, and do you even know what their risk tolerance is? I come from an organization that has lots of financial information, lots of personal information. We have a really low risk tolerance. So, but we still want to be innovative. So that's important to know when you're doing your risk assessments, and then it's important to understand that when you're communicating about risk with your executives. Make sense?
So just to save time, as Denise mentioned, FTB, is somewhere over here in the risk averse. I would say maybe over here. I've seen how she runs a tight ship on security. Give her kudos for that. And on the other side, this guy is totally risk tolerant. He's base jumper. So quickly, when you conduct risk assessment, what does it do? A good assessment identifies the threats, prioritizes the risks, enables an informed decision making, help your executives make an informed decision. I couldn't stay away. I'm an engineer, and I put everything in terms of functions and equations. Risk is a complex function of threat, likelihood, and impact, and it changes over time. That's why you have the DT over there. Your results should be quantified. When you pick up under the same circumstances, your results shouldn't be different. So they should be repeatable. They should be useful for security for mitigation actions and to management to make an informed decision, help you support and secure the organization. Remember what I said? What's the first thing you do? Identify. So you characterize your systems, input. You basically look at your infrastructure, your systems, your applications, create an inventory of that and the data, and then you come out with a clear picture of your environment. It's what's the functionality, what are the interrelationships, criticality, and data sensitivity. As of now. You can't forecast what it's going to be, right? Any assessment is as of today, as of known vulnerabilities and threats today, and your controls. We'll cover that. It's basically calculation, analysis, next step. First, we need to identify what are we looking at, right? You need to know what you're trying to solve. What's the problem?
On the previous slide, you said quantify. When you say that, are you arguing a quantitative versus qualitative assessment? Or
Correct.
Are you saying that somehow we need to put numbers to it?
So we have a way to calculate and come up with a risk matrix, and that populates risk matrix. So you can do that. You can do weighted ratio and the multiplication. Somehow you can come up with that. And then you identify your threats. I'm going to speed up a little bit because it's 10:42.
And I'm going to take his time. To answer your question, when you can, you want to quantify, right? Because when you go to communicate about the risk and get people to help you mitigate it, accept it, whatever your pitch is going to be or whatever that dialogue is going to be, it's much easier for people to work with quantifiable data. You can't always get there, but if you can, you should. It makes it more fact-based, not emotion.
If you make it a weighted ratio and do the multiplication across the three factors, that makes it quantifiable, and you'll get the same result every single time. You identify your threats, inputs, you get it from the TLAs, three-letter agencies, your vendors, the news sources, and you come with the threat statement. What are the list of potential threats, the sources, and the intent? You identify the vulnerabilities. Again, similarly, you have a baseline security requirement, minimum security specification. You conduct a security assessment. That will tell you what your vulnerabilities are. You will have a list of known vulnerabilities and risks. The next is analyze. Control analysis. You want to look at what you have today, existing controls versus planned controls. There, and categorize, it's technical, manual, it's technical, manual, automated. So you need to categorize that, how you want to do it. And you come up with a list of controls, what you have today, and what you plan to do. Likelihood. I think somebody just asked, how do you calculate likelihood? You look at your threat. What is the threat source? What is the capability? What's the technical capability for the people that are threatening us, right? You look at the vulnerability. What's the motivation? And what are the effectiveness of existing controls? Then you come with a likelihood that says it goes to a spectrum of almost never to almost certain, somewhere in between. That could be the two ends if you're talking about Fort Knox. Correct. Exactly. So you do the likelihood determination, then you do the impact analysis, input, exposure, potential loss of sensitive data. What is the impact if that happens, right? Assume this happens, then what is the impact? Goes from high, medium, low. Now you do the prioritization. Basically, you look at your risks, take steps from the likelihood and impact. That feeds in to your risk determination. You come with a risk levels and a risk matrix, which I'll show you in the next couple of slides. I think it's the next two. Document your risk assessment very clearly, documented, because what did I say? You come back 6 months from now, you need to have the documentation. If nothing changed, you should get the same result, but guaranteed things will change. Input is steps 5, 6, and 7, likelihood, impact analysis, risk determination, helps you in the documentation. Documentation helps you making the recommendations of management, making it quantitative, identify your controls as solution, or the alternative methods, accept, avoid. Then you communicate. Talked about risk level matrix. Here it is. I just threw these. I just put some stars into them on board. That's typically how they land. So I think I like that. Red's a high. If you see something that's a high risk, corrective actions are required right away, as soon as possible. Don't delay it. That should not be a variance. That should be fixed right now. If it's a medium, corrective actions are needed, and an action plan must be developed within reasonable time. I don't want to say, yeah, within the next year. That's not reasonable. So that could be a variance. Mediums variance, Denise? Mediums could go, depending on the issue, it could be a variance. Low?
So let me just jump in. So maybe you've got a medium and you need funding to resolve that issue. And if you're a state organization, we all know what that time frame looks like, right? Unless you just have some pocket of money sitting around. So that's where you're going to want it. That variance process becomes really important. And in fact, at FTB, our variance form, when somebody requests a variance, we require them to submit their procurement log information. So that shows me they've at least entered the process, so that when we do our checkup in a few months, they can't go, oh, well, I didn't get any funding. Well, you didn't get any funding because you didn't ask for it. So that now is part of the beginning of the process.
And then low, you can accept the risk or determine if actions are necessary. Information, it's, hey, do you even want to worry about it? Like I said, communicate your risk. We're saying if it's high, this is how high you want to escalate. If it's high, you want to take it to your chief executive. Of course, go through your layers, department manager, chief executive. If it's medium, senior leadership team, at least these levels of people need to know these different risks. Low, business owner. Information, just a project manager. They can deal with it. Communicate your risk indicators. Make sure your risk indicators come from a reasoned assessment. They're quantified. The attack vectors are credible. No perceptions. Please don't walk around FUD. Everybody knows FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Don't ever walk around and say sky is falling, because you'll get $0 for that. Likelihood of occurrence. Make it, again, reasoned assessment. I made this instead of reasonable, reasoned. That's very important. That's a critical difference. You should have a reason why you came with that assessment. Technical difficulty. How difficult is it for the person to exploit? How difficult is it for you to implement the controls? That needs to be documented. What's the business impact? Your business stakeholders, they should be part of your risk assessment, because they are the best people to talk about business impact. And why do we communicate and document? For this very reason. Help your management make the decision. Do they want to accept, avoid, transfer, or control? If it's quantified, it becomes easy. It's documented. And if there is any fallout, legal fallout, you can go back to risk assessment and say, this is why we didn't take an action. You have a leg to stand on. If you don't have that, somebody takes the organization to court. Government, I don't know how many do, but I don't know if you guys do. Coming from private, we're always worried about it. So we have clear documentation. Our lawyers, in addition to saying it depends, they say document, document, document. That's all they tell me all the time. You want to have this. Show your management what is the risk level before you mitigate and after you mitigate, right? So tell them, hey, look, we're pulling everything from the red down to yellow and green. That's where you want to be. right? We want to be at a low risk all the time. Anybody disagree there? I don't think so. Okay. And remember what I said next earlier? Risk is dynamic. It's a function of time. So I put that up there, that equation again. How do you quantify? Look at the likelihood and impact and the threat. And it varies over time. So today we finished our risk assessment. Your management gave you pot of money, you took care of it, implemented your mitigation controls. Are you going to stay that way? No. It could change tomorrow. It could change 6 weeks from now or 6 months from now. I said tomorrow, what if a 0 day is announced? Things change. So what was low suddenly becomes high, and stuff goes to medium. Any questions so far? Okay.
Should assessments provide recommendations?
Yes. When you communicate, it should be to help them make the informed decision. That's recommendation. Part of that is the technical difficulty. It should have recommendations. So quickly, 2 minutes, do's and don'ts for your risk assessment. Break it down into simple steps, small steps. Don't try to solve world hunger. Don't try to solve your entire organization's risk at one time. Take one project, break that down again, as simple as you can. Develop a risk management framework for your organization. Never try to wing an assessment. Be organized, gather relevant, useful data. You can jump in anytime. Fine. Be proactive. Don't wait for an incident to happen. Conduct your risk assessment. Monitor the risk all the time. Same thing with a vulnerability management plan. I'm trying to speed through because I've been told I have less than 10 minutes now. Don't wait for an incident to develop your plan. Involve SMEs. When you form a risk assessment team, don't do it by yourself. Have the information security SME, security architect, operations. They're the best people because they know the technical difficulty. The project engineers, system administrators, application administrators, DBAs, depends on the context. And you have your network people too. And follow one guide. Don't try to follow every single one of them, because all of them are trying to tell you the same thing, they just say it differently. So pick one and follow it. Or you can use the framework that we just showed. Analyze and contextualize the threats and vulnerabilities. Like I said, every vulnerability is not a risk to the organization. It's probably, what's risk to me is probably not a risk to you. It's always in context. Put things in context. Reasoned assessment. Understand the impact and likelihood. Be realistic. No, none of these clouds, the sky is falling. Customize your controls based on the criticality of data systems and business function. Don't put one blanket and say one solution fits all, because that's going to be too expensive. What's security control for my laptop is different for the servers, for the application, for the backend, for the phones. So it's contextualized. Have a baseline and then customize it. Be clear and concise and appropriate communication to your management. Reasoned, key risk indicators. And do not drive an agenda. Like Denise said, if somebody is just sitting on a medium, time passes, it becomes a high, then I fully think that, sorry if I say that, they're being lazy and they're trying to drive an agenda to get the money. Oh, I'm going to make this a high, wait till it becomes a high, so they give me the money. You'll probably get that money once, you won't get it again. And you lose your credibility, so don't do that. I've seen people who do that. Next, you want to cover the...
Yep. So what are the benefits of doing risk assessments? Besides we're required to do them, right? So let's just take that out. Why should we do them? It helps you prioritize, right? It also creates good governance because you're making fact-based decisions based on risk. And so this is going to tie into one of the last bullets, but in my organization, I've been working really hard to get people to look at decisions from a risk-based perspective. I want to do X. Well, X comes with these risks. So rather than argue over whether we should do it and how exactly we should do it, we do a risk assessment. We include the business area in that risk assessment. They have an opportunity to weigh in on all of it. And then we come to a conclusion at the end of that we all buy into. So now it begins being about governance, about how we do our work. So proud moment for me, I'm meeting with a manager, a division chief in my organization, and they're asking me some questions about a business problem. And they pull out their document, and they had my risk matrix, because we use a risk matrix very similar to that red, green, yellow. They had done a risk matrix for their business problem. Very cool, right? So now not only are they incorporating it into their decision-making processes for true operational type problems, but they're beginning to understand how that process works. So when we talked to them about information security risks, they're already much more familiar with the process and why we, categorize things the way that we do. So, good governance. It goes back to you're making fact-based decisions. Somebody comes to you with a proposal to do something, and the first words that want to come out of your mouth, are you crazy? You want to put what information out there? Well, this process helps eliminate that from happening. Because what you do is you say, great, that sounds like an interesting proposal. Let's do a risk assessment on it. And it doesn't have to be, I'm talking about, again, decisions. It doesn't have to be the full organizational risk assessment. It can be about this issue, this proposal that you want to do. You do your risk assessment working with your business partner. You're educating them on the process. You're taking the emotion or the feelings out of that decision, and you're coming up with, again, for the most part, quantifiable reasons why you're going to do what you want to do. Lastly, it builds business partnerships. So again, going back to that example where someone was just said, hey, I want to ask your opinion on this business problem, and they pulled out that risk matrix. It creates partnerships where we're working together with others to resolve whatever that issue, to mitigate the risk, to get some resources, to reduce the risk, whatever the case may be. And even in the variance process that we talked about earlier, we're building business partnerships, because when somebody wants to do something that's maybe not consistent with my information security policy, my department's information security policy, we'll say, let's do a risk assessment. We get to the bottom of the risk assessment, and maybe we decide we're going to accept the risk for a period of time until maybe, for us, it's a filing season. We don't like to make big changes during tax filing season, right? We don't want to do anything that affects anybody's ability to file a return. It's funny how people all of a sudden change, their risk tolerance changes when I tell them, okay, we can do that. We can accept that risk for that period of time. But guess what? You're going to sign your name on the variance as well, not just me, because if anything happens, you are going to be standing right next to me talking to the reporters about why we thought it was a good idea to do this. Some of those variances go away. They don't, when it's put in that context that they own it, it's not just me, I'm just kind of the gatekeeper of the process, then they might make a different decision, but you begin to build a partnership because they now understand what you're facing and they begin to own that, and then you become a partner with them and helping them achieve what they want to do for their business relationship. And we went through a lot of material really fast. So our contact information is up there again. I don't believe in recreating the wheel, so if I have anything that you think will benefit you in my organization, I'm happy to share. I share a lot of material with others, because again, I don't think we need to recreate the wheel. And so feel free to reach out to me if you want something that you think I might have.
So just to add something to what Denise just said, we don't impact FTB during the tax filing season. Same thing for businesses that we talked to. The business close, the month-end, quarterly close, they don't want to touch their systems, especially the e-business systems. So recommendation is variance, have things ready to go. The day after your business close, the quarter is done, start working on the mitigation right away. Don't say, oh, I'm going to do it in the next week or so. No, have things ready to go. That's a variance, and you're putting a timeline and the pressure on the business also to fix things.
Some of the problems that I've experienced with risk assessment as a function is that it overlaps a lot of other program areas, and the terminology seems to be synonymous, but they're not synonymous. So when you say categorization and identification, are you talking about data classification as well? And
Correct.
valuing?
Correct. So you're talking about data classification, the sensitivity of the data, your business function, tier 1, tier 2 servers, criticality of the servers, and all that comes into play.
So, and then when you say assessment, are you also talking about review and auditing? Do you see those as the same thing, as the same function, or are they somehow different?
Yeah, I think they're connected, right? You have to continuously do that. And what we've done is we've mixed a little bit of formal risk management, which the framework Srini gave you is basically modeled after NIST, right? That's pretty formal. If you were to take some of those really formal terms to your business partners and started talking about threats, vulnerabilities, and all this other stuff, their eyes cross. So that's why we use that business matrix, right? It's either likely or probable or unlikely, and this is the impact. And we take it out of that context, and we start talking about business terms. It's likely that this could happen, and here's the impact it would have on your business. So how are we going to manage that? So,
FTE, so you guys also have an audit shop?
yes.
And do you work with the audit shop, or are they completely separate functions, the risk assessment versus the audit?
Primarily the audit functions are all under my organization. So, and then we are fortunate or unfortunate that we are subject to external audits. So we get federal tax information, and every 3 years the IRS comes out and basically does a NIST type audit of us and how we use their data. And then we also annually bring in an independent vendor to do a review of different areas, in addition to my own staff who are doing risk assessment.
And I've seen audits separate from security groups. So the risk assessment team is separate from the audit group. And when you say audit level 1 finding, it gets more attention, it gets attention of the board. Now, these days in security risk assessments get attention of the board too, so.
I was just going to for clarification, so your audit shop reports to you, or is independent reports to your director?
So the audit function primarily reports to me. And then even, I have multiple reporting relationships in my organization. The state requires that there be a reporting relationship to the CIO. I have that, but I also functionally report in our administrative services division, but I also report directly to our executive officer. So I'm getting the "you're done" sign. So I'm going to stay here. I'm in this room again next, so if anybody wants to ask any questions, I think Srini will hang around as well for a few minutes. Thank you very much.